Hello, everybody, and welcome to our industry speaker series from AIT. Tonight, the art of visual effects. My name's Adam Moder. I'm a 3D teacher and subject coordinator at AIT in Melbourne, and I'll be hosting this session tonight. So thank you for joining us, everybody. Just before we get started, just get a quick check. Can everybody hear me? Is someone in the chat there? Can people hear me okay and see me okay? Yes, yes. I can see chat people coming in. Hi, everybody. Welcome. Great. You can hear me. Awesome. Hey, Dean. Some familiar faces there. And welcome, everybody, to this. What's going to be a fantastic session here from Dennis Jones, Rising Sun Pictures in Adelaide, on the art of visual effects. Before we get started, I'd just like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land over which we are meeting, and we'll jump straight into it. Tonight, what we're going to be doing is we've got two guest speakers to talk to you tonight about their involvement in the visual effects industries. First off, we're going to hear from George Little, who is from the Australian Production Design Guild. He's the president of the Australian Production Design Guild, and he's going to first fill us in on the Australian Production Design Guild, what they do, what they're about, and how they're involved in the visual effects industry in Australia. Shortly after that, we're going to introduce Dennis Jones, who's a visual effects supervisor from Rising Sun Pictures in Adelaide. And we're very fortunate to have him here tonight to talk about the visual effects that Rising Sun Pictures were involved in with the film Mortal Kombat. So it's awesome. I've seen it myself. It's really good. So you're in for a real treat. It's a great presentation. After that, we're going to field some questions. So if anybody in the viewing audience there has any questions, please type them in the chat window, and we've got some people on standby to field those questions, and we'll run them by, and shortly afterwards have a session with Dennis, talking about potentially some questions that everybody might have about working in visual effects. How do you get into visual effects? What's involved? What's the state of the industry, perhaps? So feel free to chat that sort of stuff in. And then afterwards, we'll move on with some AIT related stuff, talking a little bit about the course that we offer here at AIT in visual effects, and take it further from there. So we'll get going. Without further ado, I want to introduce to you George Little from the Australian Production Design Guild. George, and he is going to talk to us about what they do with the Australian Production Design Guild and how it's integral to the visual effects industry here in Australia. So George, over to you.
Thanks for that. Hi, everybody. Are we okay?
Yeah, you're good to go, my friend.
All right, good. The Australian Production Design Guild really are delighted to partner with AIT and Rising Sun Pictures in tonight's event. A quick summary of what the Apdg is about. The Guild is 12 years old. It has over 400 members. It's a community of designers and design associates working in screen and live performance. Our main aims are to promote design and underline its importance as an essential creative element in any production, and to create a supportive community of designers and design associates, sharing ideas and experiences. We also celebrate our colleagues' works in our annual Apdg Awards, including awards for outstanding work in digital design, in the digital design world, and we have many from this world as members. I'd encourage you to check out our website for more info on that. I was struck by a quote in the Rising Sun Pictures website. To provide infinite storytelling through a fusion of art, technologies, and creativity. That, to me, sums up the job description of all designers and design associates in our profession. We create the world in which the story lives. Some of the most brilliant, innovative design work is coming out of the digital design world. And tonight we'll get a taste of that with DJ. Design is such an exciting and rewarding business to be in. And after 50 years working as a designer, my enthusiasm and excitement for the work continues. I continue to be amazed and delighted by the work of our colleagues in this field. So tonight, let's share some of DJ's work and his experiences in Mortal Kombat and the amazing VFX work on that film. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Awesome, George. It's great to hear about that. Let's bring on Dennis Jones. If Dennis Jones could jump right into it. How are you, mate? Good to see you again.
Hello, Adam.
Welcome from Adelaide and Rising Sun Pictures. So Dennis Jones has had a long history of credits on visual effects as a visual effects supervisor. I think you started off as a compositor.
That's
worked
right.
on films like obviously Mortal Kombat, and I saw you also worked on Dumbo as well, which was, I love that film. I thought it was awesome. But there's a huge list of films that you've worked on. So I'll hand it over to you, my friend, and let you talk to us about the visual effects that Rising Sun were instrumental with on Mortal Kombat.
Brilliant. Well, thanks a lot. I've actually, I've got a video clip about half an hour long, which will take you through. We did so much work on Mortal Kombat, and obviously being a locally shot film, I was very proud and very glad to contribute to. So I'll share my screen and we'll watch that, and then we can do questions afterwards. Thank you.
Fantastic. Now this might be a little bit soft for some people in volume. So if that's the case, just crank up your volume or put some headphones on. It sounds good on my phones here, but we tested it before. It was a little bit soft in parts. So see, here you go.
It's Dennis Jones, and I'm a visual effects supervisor here at Rising Sun Pictures based in Adelaide. I'd like to take you through some of the work we completed for Mortal Kombat, which was a New Line Warner Brothers production based out of Sydney with Chris Godfrey and Proof Fletcher running the overall client team. And a lot of work was done here in Adelaide, which is where the actual principal photography took place as well. So first up, we have Lord Raiden, essentially a lightning-based god of the series, I guess the game. We're in the game world, and I guess one of Simon's thing was to bring a lot of the game aesthetic and ideas, but really ground them and try and make them as natural and physical as possible. Raiden doesn't use his powers directly in the film that much. He does confront a few people, and he has a face-off with Shang Tsung, who's the main rival, or I guess god of Outworld, the dark side, if you like. And a lot of the time in the film is actually used as a narrative device to traverse and get people to go from location to location. And there's obviously bits later in the film where they use them as a kind of bait to separate the team and sort of play and win the odds game. So it became quite critical to establish quite a snappy performance. I guess a lot of the time when we first were talking about it, and I'll show you some concepts in a minute, we were talking about kind of gateways and portals that would hang around in the back of shots for quite a long time and maybe even affect the world they lived in. I think as the cut and the story developed, we ended up going for quite a snappy, zappy kind of appearance where people would and they'd appear, which was helped because I think the lightning works really well when you see it kind of evolve, and it's quite impactful and lights up the scene. So I guess they did well with the on-set material. They had on-set lighting bars and all that kind of stuff, which was really good. We had to combine multiple takes, so take out the actor, isolate the lighting setup, and then kind of recreate that and use that to anchor and base our lighting. So I think it was worth it. The practical lighting certainly grounded the effect, and there's lots of sort of dynamic shadows on characters, which we did match move everything and augment with our own, but just having that kind of live action response really, I think, really grounds the effect. So yeah, nearly every shot that had lightning planned had this kind of fluorescent flickery tube setup, which I think worked really well and caught some of the character that we needed. Still frame wise, let me just hide that for a minute. So like I said, I guess he's the god of lightning. We're talking about portals, so we were exploring gateways of light and I guess ways to traverse. The game has a fairly direct lightning strike, and you see the electric skeleton and then the body traverses up. So we were kind of exploring these themes, and obviously with him being a lord and one of the sort of immortal beings of this world, we wanted to make sure it had a good presence. So like I said, we kind of explored a few where it would actually sort of build up and taint the environment. Some of these we kind of liked with the salt crystal and the light, kind of light absorption. And there was some potential for some really graphic shapes like you see in the bottom left, and potential for like long strands of glass and things like that. So we had a more physical presence. And then I guess as I kind of alluded to, as we got into it, and kind of saw the shots, the timing, and the kind of, some of them are very actiony, people portal in as they're running to fight. So we ended up cementing this kind of real snappy kind of gateway of light and energy. Early on, we had explored the idea of having kind of mesmerizing, kind of frozen in time, almost like subtime lightning, slowly evolving in these wonderful, elegant shapes. But again, too much story to tell, I guess, in the time we had. So we ended up exploring this quite zappy, powerful, direct blast, which I think works well. It's impactful, and it certainly connects into the realm of lightning. Outworld, home of the villains. Now, I guess for the start of this, we explored, again, we kind of start referencing the game material, and then we build on it from there. So in the game, his palace is quite a traditional Chinese kind of throne room, actually quite small, a bit like I guess a Genghis kind of collection area of lots of treasure hoards and things like this. So, but Simon was really interested in opening up the space. So I guess as we were developing the concepts, we were exploring some of the sort of otherworldly light, because we can have multiple planets and things like that. So it can be a little bit otherworldly. And then as we slowly sort of introduced light and space, it became clear that Simon responded to, I guess, a more open look. So we started looking at these kind of brutalist, Eastern European brutalist structures, and we imagined like almost like a decayed, I guess, cathedral, if you like. Yeah, I guess this kind of throne area, but losing all the walls and being a bit more at one with the nature. So we started exploring these very kind of brutalist, organic stone shapes that were fashioned out of the landscape, almost too big to be believed sometimes. After exploring a few of the kind of construction techniques and the materials, we ended up to kind of sympathize with the background or the plates that they shot. I guess principal photography took place at Lee Creek, which has this wonderful Martian kind of stone mineral landscape. So a lot of that is fairly untreated. It's quite natural and beautiful out there. So, and it's a slate quarry and all this kind of stuff, and that features in the background of one of the other sequences where they fight in the quarry. So we ended up sort of settling on this kind of chiseled, manufactured, but still kind of raw, organic, volcanic kind of environment. And then basically ended up, having to sort of take that into a full asset build and then augment a 2.5D projection of the environment. I would say that this is one of the later additions to the production time frame. There was actually a reshoot for a lot of this dialogue, which I think was needed to help expedite the action. And so this was a kind of a late addition to the piece, as it were. So we actually went and supervised a drone shoot up at Lee Creek, which is a disused quarry, and managed to capture a lot of the photography that we needed to kind of ground the environment. We ended up making a big 180-degree cyc, and then pretty much just kind of laid out cameras and sort of ran through. It's kind of fixed time of day, so not too challenging in terms of lighting. And once we found the setup and the kind of depth cues and palette, then it was it was all steam ahead on that one. Sub-Zero, one of the main protagonists. I guess he's the lieutenant, I guess, to Shang-Chi, who's the general. Sorry, Shi. The henchman, he's the lead assassin. So he's one of the guys that's pretty much causing a lot of trouble for our main heroes throughout the film. And he's on a kind of blood feud with Cole and Scorpion's bloodline, so as the rival clan, ninja clans. I guess we opened up, and the first time we kind of really get to see him is here as he's kind of flexing his powers. So he's kind of summoning a hailstone storm attack. Now for us, that's a lot of, I guess, rigid body effects simulation, and then a lot of lighting and shading stuff goes into this, which is fun. For us, I guess a lot of it came down to choreography actually, which was the sticking point for the sequence, the way. And then we ended up establishing this kind of I think it was two by the end, 2 or 3 phase kind of rising and smashing, where he's got this kind of percussive, quiet, eerie, and then smashing down. On set, they did have giant ice cannons that fired blocks of ice, like pretty much as big as my head. And they made like hundreds of those to have fun on set. So we had a lot of practical reference that was great. We had a lot of, I think, on-set material that we used and helped, augment and ground a lot of our CG. So principally CG, just because of the choreography and the kind of ability to control and time what we needed. There are key elements on tables that interact with people that we kept, and a lot of the sort of ground litter that is there, half of that's probably practical as well, which just helps ground it and really gave us some really good cues for the lighting and look of the scene, which, with ice, light and stuff, it's very variable. Because of the way the light transmits through the ice and stuff, we found that we had to texture and get our digi-doubles fairly well shaded. So Jax, Sub-Zero, some of the Scorpion stuff at the end as well, we needed like kind of to make sure the rays coming through the ice and stuff had the right character and weren't too simple. So we ended up doing fairly good pass at look dev, even for characters that we didn't even need to digi-double, just to make sure that held up and had the right character. I guess Jax and Sub-Zero's confrontation, 2 parts to this really. I guess there's the supernatural freezing and slow-mo time of the gun, and then the slightly more disgusting ice lesions on Jax's arm. So I guess the first one, not too bad. I guess just trying to establish this kind of slow-mo, well, I guess it's actually freezing bullets, right? So some of the buckshot on the ice is freezing away. Now that was simmed and animated, and then this is a still frame that shows some of the kind of look dev that we ended up with. Now, I guess quite interesting, just trying to sort of evolve ice over its lifetime. So we go from quite thin, wet, early looking ice to slightly denser, cloudier, and then all the way up to where we get nice crystal long shards with that kind of growth pattern. So pretty much, I guess we had a lot of ice to do in the film, so we ended up coming up with quite a few attributes between effects and shading that would kind of cloud based on age and things like that. And so we could always feed in different attributes, get different looks, and even have static shapes that had kind of evolving cloudy forms in them as the ice froze. So ended up being quite a good tool by the end of the film, and we had a lot of control over where and what was evolving and aging when, and then obviously trying to get that thing where nothing stops growing, so the ice is always evolving on top of itself. So it's quite a tiered problem, but I think in the end then we obviously want to just make it look as elegant and as natural as possible. And then same kind of deal for Jax's arms. I guess a lot of it was about really nice match moves. We had to do some takeovers where we had performances that obviously weren't quite frozen, so there's a lot of kind of clean up and arm stabilization, and then obviously paint back through the background of it. And then really just this really nice kind of haunting progression of ice along the arm, and shading and shading and shading. So real tough one to get right with the sense of interior, I guess the layers of blood within inside. So But yeah, good effect. And then obviously it shatters, and then we transfer to a more kind of traditional rigid asset with bone and gristle and that kind of stuff as he falls off the ledge. Reptile, this is one of our earlier pieces that we kind of touched base with the client on earlier. We were asked to do a little bit. They had some stunt viz. They did pretty well with stunt vizzing the whole show. And so we got some stunt-based footage, which was basically a version 1 rough cut using stunties. We initially were asked to kind of, I think, re-block out some of the action shots. I get, obviously with the lizard, with the reptile character, people are interested in how he may perform. I guess, is he 4-legged, 2-legged? And then there was a desire, certainly from Chris as well, to kind of take some of the edge off the bipedal stuntman, you know, because they were doing kind of breakdancing moves, and we knew we had a lot more range in this character. The other thing is we also picked up the concept design for this guy as well. So we got a kind of first pass from Weta, and then had kind of been asked to explore it. Some of it, he was a bit too elegant and cat-like. Some of these, you know, we were exploring sort of fugging him up a bit, if you like. And then we kind of ended up on this kind of large lizard type dude with battle scars. You know, he's fairly grounded, and Simon obviously wanted everyone to have a little bit of a history, a kind of worn-in nature, so no one's like brand new off the production line ready for the movie. Everyone's already been doing their craft for 20, 30 years, you know. It's just honing their capabilities. So we did a lot of creature design, and they ended up with this kind of guy who ended up kind of, we obviously had to, in the film he has to stand up and he has to interact in that sense as well, but then there's a good opportunity to get down on all fours and do some of the kind of scampering along the wall. So that was, I guess, one aspect, was just designing and maturing a creature. And then on top of that, there is the flare, which is, I guess, the thing that ultimately reveals him and shows them where he is. And then, I guess, in part with that is the camouflage and the idea that he has this kind of active camouflage that can decloak and recloak as he wishes for his assassin, kind of stealth assassin mode. So the sequence pretty much opens up, you know, we wanted to reveal and introduce him as the characters are kind of exploring and trying to work out what's happening, you know, what's causing all these disturbances, and obviously understand that there's a threat on its way based on the tone of the movie. A lot of it for us was, I guess, trying to establish the language of this kind of invisible hollow man style effect. We explored a lot of different options in terms of camouflage and effects. You know, we didn't want to go anything too digital, like a predator effect or a cloaking shield. So we explored. We had one idea originally, which was that it was, I guess, a kind of light-based delay. Like, as light hit him, you know, he could adapt and change, but as light changed, maybe it would reveal and it would kind of delay a little bit and lag, and you'd see him for that brief moment. So we explored some of those things, but again, as the edit tightened and the desire to have sort of quick, direct story points, nothing too vague or interpretive, we ended up going for a fairly direct kind of decloak, recloak. They actually committed to fighting invisible people for a bit, which was a decision that was up in the air for a long time. So we had moments where there was ghostly ones for a little bit, where you felt a bit of an outline, but we ended up going for a full sound effect and taking those ones completely out, and then just kind of committing and going full kind of transitory, veiny, slight kind of energy burn as it goes, just to kind of draw your eye and lead you in. On top of that, we had the flare. So I guess flare was a large component in terms of the lighting design for the sequence. And one of the things that I think was really interesting was the sense of that red light and the overwhelming kind of nature of that. I guess this is a practical flare that was sort of purposed and shot just for some reference. I guess one thing is just how bright the exposure is. Obviously shooting in broad daylight, and this just completely swamps it. Even overwhelms the sun shadows to the point where you just get the flare shadow. There's quite a lot of smoke as well that builds up with these things. So a couple of decisions were made. We had to kind of almost tone map it into the sequence. So we wanted to get that feel of saturation and burn, but we didn't want to lose everything in the room and end up with this just bright red room. So we ended up trying to find this balance of that kind of red stark emergency lighting, and then obviously try and keep some of the cues and some of the stuff for the cutaways and that, so we didn't have to go too crazy in terms of overexposing everything. On top of that, there's, I guess, the organic side of the creature. So we had full character with muscle sims, bone structure and all this kind of stuff. And then we ran, I guess, effects classes within that. So there are lots of the, I guess, nervous system and things like that were actually just effects generated geo, just kind of, you know, having a little root system within the creature. And then we had the full musculature as well that came from the CFX team. Ended up becoming a brief part of the film, I guess, not as originally. This effect was peppered throughout the film and was something that we kind of revisited, and each time it got more aggressive. I think by the end, tastes and narrative wise, it became mostly the departure of Kung Lao, the razor hat guy. So I think, you know, the idea is that this is Shang, this is how he absorbs his power, this is his kind of feeding event. And I think some of the problem for him is he's running out of souls on Outworld, so he's keen to kind of take over a new realm just because he's hungry. So for us, it's mainly this idea of, I guess, exchanging life force. So Shang traditionally in the game has a green energy to him. So we had this kind of green light-based additive soul energy, if you like. And then to go along with that and complement that, we had a kind of withering, aging, deforming of the features, just to really sell the fact that he was taking his life. So ended up being a bit of a little kind of one hit moment. Liu Kang, his, I think, cousin actually, but compadre to Kung Lao, the hat guy. So he's a man of fire. Now Simon, I guess, had an aversion to blown out or too clipped. He liked to retain the detail of things and wasn't open to too much kind of blown out or flatness in the fire. So that was one of the challenges. We had to retain a lot of detail and had to make sure that the detail was almost hyper real in some cases. So every lick of fire has, you know, lovely little kind of turbulent waves running through it. Again, really good on-set job with the hand lighting and the interactive lighting as well. It helps really ground it. So, you know, we're obviously painting out and removing the practical side of that and then adding in our fire. Full kind of fire fluid sim stuff that we do for the hand shots, all match move driven. And then the dragon was actually, I guess, based on initial designs for the dragon, featured quite a rigid-bodied, solid, Chinese kind of looking dragon. And as we went on, we realized that we wanted it composed entirely of fire, which led to some, you know, first exploring, covering it and having the core still be solid. And then by the end, we obviously manufactured an entirely fire-based dragon, which was a couple of shots, you know, big spectacle for a couple of shots. A lot of that, I mean, driven, rigid body, all the way through anim, CFX, that kind of stuff, and then over to the effects team for dressing in fire. So lots of control over visibility, and again, that thing with Simon and the sort of white point, not clipping out too much. We had to sort of layer it up, do a lot of control, and then obviously try and retain features like the face. So we had I guess, bits of mesh designated as hero and needed to stay glowing, like the whiskers and the eyes, and then we would take that information into effects, and that would help influence the strength of fire in certain areas, which was cool. I guess we touched a little bit on portals with Lord Raiden's one and the lightning portals. We also had I guess a fair few. We had the dark portal, which is primarily generated by Shang, and Sub-Zero uses to kind of traverse the world. I guess with it being sort of dark world, outworld, and the kind of dark matter, dark energy of the the villains. We were first exploring these kind of, I guess Outworld has in the lore has a history of this kind of, it's a place where worlds merge, if you like. So originally we were exploring this kind of partialness, like seeing through to bits of structure from another dimension, if you like. So as the portal manufactured, you would see forms from the other realms. And, you know, that it's kind of interesting, and as we developed it, I think the thing that Simon liked most was the kind of smoky, inky side of it. So after exploring a lot of this kind of structural stuff, or structure in sort of in a kind of smoky, ethereal sense, we ended up sort of leaning towards a slightly more smoky, liquidy portal, which is where some of our later designs ended up settling on. So yeah, we started exploring these kind of, again, Simon wanted to avoid I guess initially too much of an aperture, but once we saw this kind of living tunnel that we ended up with, he was actually happy to go full into it. So I think for a while we explored these ones, which were a little more gunky, a little more oily, I guess, fluid based at their core. And then we ended up settling on, I guess, more the sort of subtle secondary stuff, which is actually where the material starts to evaporate and become smoke. So we're looking probably a slightly more powdery into smoke kind of idea, but driven by a kind of fluid, underlying fluid motion, which we wanted to be, I guess, elegant, but also consuming, because various characters dissolve into it by the end of the film as well. So we ended up, something like this, it ended up being more smoky than liquid. I think by the time we did some early tests with shininess, we were all agreed that the kind of matter, powderier look was a lot better suited to the cinematography and all that. And like I said, we had explored initially, I guess, forms dissolving into that and coming out of it, materializing. But that we didn't really take that into shots. And then Melina is kind of like a variant. I guess within the game, Melina has her color, so most characters have their kind of color palette. So a lot of the time we were doing her in the game, hers is quite a fast attack mode. So she jumps behind you, portals away, and then appears in your face and gives you a kick. So her ones we went with quite an explosive, snappy one. And then we just had these kind of explosive flecks of light with her color trademark, just to tie it into her and differentiate it. So hers were quite snappy, and then with the Sub-Zero ones, which again were, things that kind of sit there and loiter for a little bit in the background, we ended up trying to solve this kind of interesting, tendril, fluid, smoky kind of creature, otherworldly for sure. Lots of sims, and to be honest, it wasn't too bad. It actually, early design work kind of paid off, and then shot running and execution was pretty straightforward by the end. Lots of collision with match moves in the world, and the features kind of hug and form around the world. But yeah, good challenge. And then we had to, I guess, cast light and integrate the characters as the depth went in. Again, on set they did pretty well. Whenever they had a portal shot, they had, I guess, matting. They had like a tunnel of felt that the character would walk through and stuff, so that helped, again, just generate a little bit more depth and help integrate things. Fire Arcana, so I guess Arcana is the term in the movie for people's powers. So the Fire Arcana is, I guess, a shared motif between Scorpion and Cole. So we see Cole kind of develop his power as he goes, and he ends up, with this kind of charging up, and then the same thing for, I guess, as Scorpion reveals his classic "Get over here, lion." So they kind of share this heat, fire, like the fires of hell. I guess the Scorpion's motif is he's been banished to hell, and he's learned to conquer and tame the fires of hell rather than be consumed by them. That's obviously a trait that Cole is inheriting through his bloodline. So Cole also had the power here to actually, he was about to kind of go off and do his power, and then Sub has kind of quelled him with his ice powers. And then likewise Scorpion, it's his motif, so it was used lightly on the kunai to establish him, so we could introduce the flame and kind of make that connection right back to the start. and then obviously shows up later on, which you'll see a little bit of here. So, but again, I guess the show generally, and you'll see a few more examples, lots of, I guess, little one-off applications of the techniques and the powers, very much action-driven, very much to suit the shot. You know, it was very much sort of take the palette of fire, ice, and these kind of entities, and then kind of sculpt them and tailor them to what the shots needed at the time, which was good. It kept it really diverse, and it never got too formulaic. It was always something to react to or to learn from, which is good. I guess we touched on the kunai a little bit. So the signature weapon of Scorpion, I guess the film establishes that it's a kind of medieval Japanese gardening tool of all things. That's how certainly Simon chose to ground it. And then we obviously had to develop the physics, the look, and the feel for this kind of what should be a relatively heavy metal chain, and then get the right feel so it didn't feel too elastic. It kept its rigidness. We really like the idea of tension, and some of that is played in, especially this scene here. And I guess this one is a nod to the opening of the film where Scorpion actually slices Sub-Zero's cheek. So this is obviously Sub-Zero showing his mastery as they come back to face each other. I guess a lot anim driven for a lot of it, so full match move, I guess animated kind of spline based system, and then a lot of I guess character effects, or CFX as we call it, to get the sort of rigid and chain-like non-deforming nature of it, to follow that animation as a guide. The other thing is one of our lead animators, Victor, is also a traditionalist, so he did a full kind of line paint over of the sequence, and that really helped, I guess, iterate and hone the choreography. And the other thing, I guess, with it being a 2D based approach is we weren't really worried about physics or the rigs or any of the sort of technicalities that come into some of the animation passes. We were really allowed to explore weight, form, shape, composition very quickly. And that really helped, I think, guide and ground and get a lot of this kunai work moving quite quickly. So that was really good, really beneficial. I guess ice effects, so Sub-Zero we saw a bit at the start as he's raining down the hail, and then this sequence in particular is the big kind of set piece fight with him against Scorpion. And obviously Cole teams up with Scorpion, and together they may or may not defeat Sub-Zero. Sub-Zero has his ice sword, which was his signature weapon during this fight. And obviously we had a beautiful shot that was in the trailer of the formation of that. So. And then a lot of the show, I guess, a lot of Sub-Zero's powers, we ended up kind of, Simon liked it quite detailed and quite, you know, quite a lot going on in terms of shapes, angular and angriness. So a lot of the time with Sub-Zero's powers, we would be building from kind of shards and splintered and this very kind of angry looking effect, which was, you know, so we had systems to kind of grow. We had a lot of kind of target-based shapes that were laid out, animation and timing, and then effects would kind of grow into that and then do the sort of secondary growth on top of everything, which was really cool. It led to a really kind of good balance of, I guess, design and layout, and then getting the natural sort of evolution working. Scorpion Fire, so I guess his signature move. Great. So for us, you know, pretty good culmination, the fight with Sub-Zero. And then obviously Sub-Zero is getting, I guess, flamed alive on one side. So we had they did a pretty good job, practical makeup, and we had a transition where Sub-Zero was clean and then he was fully torched, and there's a couple of shots in the middle where we had to kind of actively transition and embellish that. And then obviously, likewise for Scorpion, he's kind of face mask off, revealing his identity underneath, and then we kind of give a nod to the original game where he goes full flaming skull. Initial tests, I guess it's always a bit, as soon as you go for a flaming skull, you're into the kind of Ghost Rider territory, so we knew we didn't want to go that far and ever kind of reveal the full head. So we ended up sort of having, I guess, match move, geometry, kind of live action character projected on, and then we had built sort of underlying features and the teeth and all that kind of stuff to reveal through effects, dealt with the transition and the kind of embry skin that's coming off, and then also then dressed on the breath elements and the fire elements. And likewise, I guess, portal motif at the end there. So he has a fire portal, which again, a couple of shots is established at the start as he collapses away, and then shows up at the end. And again, for us, just, you know, I guess, animation match move, and then just trying to get that effects timing. Again, quite snappy, and quite, you know, trying to retain some of the highlight detail throughout, so we didn't ever clip out to white. That's it. Good summary. Really good show. Really proud local product. So yeah, really happy with the result, and I hope you enjoy it. Thank you very much.
Wow, that was fantastic, Dennis. That was absolutely awesome to see that. The second time I've seen that, and I think it was even better than the first time. I was just blown away by those breakdowns and by the work you guys all did as a team on visual effects. Just fantastic to see the complexity of those effects, and you know, how you resolve them, and you managed to achieve the vision in the film, which I've seen that borrowed from the game, had all the interesting stuff, you know, that was in the game, but true to the game, but still then gave it a consistent art style, art direction throughout the film, and made it work as a film as well. So just awesome to see that. Thank you very much for sharing that. We've got a wealth of questions to get through, so I hope you're ready for them. Everyone's really fascinated with that process. So I'll field some of the questions for you. Just before we start, I've got a question of my own. I'll start off with the first question. I was absolutely fascinated to see that change of ideas. So, you know, we thought we were going with this way. The concept art was like this. We were going to do this first, but we didn't put that in, and then we dropped this, and then we went with something else. So that process seems to be very flexible and very changeable, and there's a fair degree of input there from principal, you know, players within the studio. I'm just wondering if you could detail that process a little bit. Who's involved? Is it just the key, you know, is it yourself and just some key people, or do you get the team involved? And, you know, to offer feedback in daily rushes, is it that sort of thing? Or do you try and stick to an original concept? And what sort of time would you allocate to make those sort of changes? Because I imagine as well, you wouldn't want them to go on forever. And at some point you have to lock down a decision and go with something. So what's your insights on that?
Yeah, well, different places vary. Like some studios like Marvel are pretty big on it. They have screenings and ratings, and they'll do a cut, and then based on how people feel, or if people never quite get that story point, they'll tear it down and, you know, reshoot. And so it's more common these days. Like, you know, you used to have your Scorseses who have the film in their head and they go and make it, you know, and it's definitely a bit more dynamic these days. Like Simon as well he's a first-time feature director. He's done a fair amount of video game and commercial work in the past, and I think he set a really good sensibility with taking these game characters, which I think most people think of as quite one-dimensional, you know, they go beat up things, and whereas actually, you know, games have a rich history and lore of their own. And so I think one thing he was doing was really, I guess, trying to channel that and almost take that to a proper, like, build on it and respect it and make it more natural, more photoreal, more, you know. So there was a lot of sometimes he felt it was interesting. Like, I think Mortal Kombat in particular, I guess going back to your question about teams and the process, was a really good one because the production was in the same city as the visual effects, and we were drafted in early enough that we're actually, you know, we were doing costume design, whereas normally you would get, here's the photography, here's the costume, you know. So we were involved from day one in that process. And to be honest, that was a lot of, certainly at the pre-production stage, it's a lot of heads of department, you know, everyone's got an interest. And it was interesting, we were designing some of the big stunt characters, a big guy with a hammer, and we made this big collar, and everyone, you know, we're all there, and Simon's like, love it, brilliant. And then the stunt guy's like, oh, I can't do anything in that collar, like, you know. And yeah. So it was interesting because even that, you know, managed to inform a better concept. So there's definitely a different vested interests. Like Simon wants to, I guess, bring you a uniqueness. Doesn't want to rip off the game. Like at one point we had dragons everywhere. It was like Mortal Kombat. Get dragons everywhere. And then
the branding in there.
Yeah, exactly. And he's like, no, we're over. We're shoveling it in too much, basically. And yeah. And he was very adamant from the get-go that he wasn't going to do any bikinis or all the ladies are probably more dressed than the men as well. So, but definitely a lot of I guess early on it's a lot of pre-production, art direction, set building, costuming. A lot of those kind of worlds are coming together for the first time, like on set when you actually you make a place, you put a camera in, you light it, and there's a world right straight away. And so that's where it really comes together. And then a lot of, I guess, the other great discussions we had were in the editorial stage, where we actually, I think we were Australia based for a while, and then we moved to, I think the guy who did Iron Man 1, actually, Dan Leventhal, like great VFX editor in Hollywood, really action and, really takes on some of these big crazy worlds and crafts people and narrative out of it and stuff. So, and that saw a lot of big changes. Just, it's too cold. We need some people reacting, it's too one-dimensional. And so lots of these kind of motivational things creeping in. And so some things that, I guess, as an effect, you go, oh, that's cool. Let's have a close-up of that thing. But in a story with an arc and stuff, it's some of that you can just get rid of, because you're not in that moment. So lots of those great decisions and being part, I was lucky enough to be involved in a lot of those pre-production and even the editorial meetups, which normally don't happen. Like most movies, you get notes from an editorial session, So, but we're actually sat there dialoguing and could even sort of raise points, which is really, really brilliant. And I think Simon as well, as at that point, who's the director, was looking for his team of trusted people that he could rely on, because there's so much to do that I think relying on one man to know everything and carry everything is. So he really enjoyed sort of getting lieutenants that were into the world and
collaborating.
I love any of the effectsy stuff. I love, and I'm a big gamer as well. So yeah.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Great. Look, I've got a list of questions here, and then potentially we've got some in the chat, I think, as well, that perhaps Anthony can ask you about. I'll just start off with some of the more generic questions, which you probably sort of maybe you've heard before. What advice would you give to anybody wanting to get into the industry as a visual effects artist? And I guess related to that, the first three questions, are there particular types of work or art styles that they should focus on? And what work practices or methods would you suggest they adopt? So that's, I guess, from somebody that's aspirationally wanting to get into the industry.
Yeah, well, it's changed a lot. I mean, I'm 22 years now, right? So for me, there was, I guess, Bournemouth in the UK had just started around that time, and I think pathways are a lot straightforward, a lot more straightforward, I think, and actually, I think the amount of content as well. One thing we're seeing is just the amount of requests for work and content means that it's a seller's market, if you know what I mean. Like,
it's very hungry at the moment, isn't it?
It's very hungry, yeah. So I think there's a lot of good opportunity out there for sure. And I'd say it's definitely a good time to be trying to get into it, and with the remote stuff, like even those boundaries have changed a lot, in terms of being able to sort of work from where you want. So, I mean, one of the big shifts I've seen, and would love to do more of myself, is some of the more real-time centric stuff, like, I guess for me, like one of the things that feature has over most other things is that attention to detail that, I guess games is catching, like the boundary between game and film now is, the technology, the overlap is crazy. And I think, I know, when I started off as a compositor, it was very hard to get test plates to practice compositing, right? So for me, I was an industrial designer. That was my entry point. And I came into project modeling guns and then animating them and then lighting them and then needed to comp them. And, somehow I really enjoyed the comp stage, but purely kind of bumbling in sideways, I guess, was how I because, and I would say it's probably the same now. There's a lot of just attitude and aptitude stuff where if you know, I guess longer term and as a career, it's not straightforward, right? There's a lot of push and pull on your life and your time, and you know, and I think there's an expectation as well in terms of being a part of films, knowing what, you know, knowing the kinds of things that are happening, like the bar is continually going up, TV, you know, like, so there's lots of, I guess, finishing and trends and stuff to get a part of. But I reckon real time, like something playing around, because I guess the best thing is people that are going to be doing it anyway, right? So I mean, even those dads that do the TikTok videos where they put their kids on lava, you know, like, I mean, that's like some dude with his phone now just clicking, and you know, so I think a lot of it is creativity and problem solving, and then teams, and even just some of, you know, deadlines. Like there's a lot of that, just doing what you say, honoring, you know, and I think also believing and having an opinion. Like as you, obviously as you start, you're going to be like, oh God, you know, but at some point you're going to start making calls, and you know, the more you're into it, the more you really like an industry lighting or something, you know, there's lots of technicalities, and then there's lots of just making cool stuff as well. So I think, yeah, I'd say that as an individual with like a computer in front of them, like playing around with something like an Unreal, you got so many free assets, you got the world of lighting, camera, you know, like it's all kind of there, and you can throw it around pretty quick. And then, you know, seeing some of the trends on set, like with the Mandalorian and the ILM doing like virtual productions now. So
I guess, yeah, we can jump straight into that question, which I was going to ask later. How much of that virtual production was used in Mortal Kombat, if at all? And do you see there's a lot of discussion about how much that's going to impact the film industry, and how much the traditional compositing route, green screen and all of that will still be around, and you get differing opinions depending on who you're talking to. What are your thoughts about that trend?
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Like, I guess there's a limit to the kinds of shots and stuff. Like, I mean, I think Mandalorian did it, but then replaced it all in post anyway, right? I think so. But yeah, I would say better than, in terms of having a chat on set and stuff moving as you talk, it's better than, you know, you have those chats and it's just a blue room and stuff. So, and I think I've seen some good stuff with actors being able to sort of feed back into that and get a sense of, you know, so even their eye lines are adapting to what's happening.
Yeah.
So I think, like, and it'll only get better. Like, I'm on a project at the moment and they've done a few like blue screen spaceship kind of things. And some of the shots, like, they're pretty in camera, you know, like, I mean, I used to love car comps because it was just, it's a really good way to sort of just play with getting something so natural that you forget about it, you know, like that, that forensic kind of comping and just getting all those bits right. So I love those kind of ones that feel so natural. But yeah, Mortal Kombat was a bit more old school, so gaffer tape and fluoro tubes, you know. I was I was part of the team on Gravity, which you basically had a, you know, massive LED cube.
Yeah.
You know, so that stuff like that is pretty cool. And the other thing that's interesting is it puts a lot of the design, and I think this is where Mandalorian did, you have to do a lot more up front, right? So you're building a world that you take and film, which puts it in the other camp where you're more into pre-production and, you know, rather than the money spent and quick hurry it up, you're in this other camp where we've got 6 months to design it and plan for it. And so I kind of like that shift. It brings back that moment where people are focused, because when I've been on set, it's such a different world to when you're in a company doing VFX, you know, like, you know, today, it's all right, we'll get the next time it will stop flickering. And, you know, whereas on set, man, you're like, okay, 20 minutes and everyone's coming back. You know, so you just you learn and think fast. So I think anything to get us back in some of that moment where you can all sit and react. You've got the 4 people that matter. You can literally move it and say, brilliant. Like one thing they did do on Mortal Kombat, which was interesting, they did a lot of set miniature stuff, and then they built like VR versions. They basically like photo scanned that in, and then the director would like headset and start planning out.
Oh wow. Okay.
That was in pre-production. So that, I think that was pretty nifty when I saw that.
Yeah,
Because
because you can choose your shots and all of
yeah,
that. Yeah,
exactly.
yeah, that's cool.
But
Yeah, well, I know what you mean about shifting the focus to the you know, pre-production and actually having it all ready and like creating a world and then getting everyone to basically act in that world and shoot in that world is definitely a shift, isn't it? Back from
it's good, and you, because a lot of it, I think, and I've seen it with visual effects shots where it's all blue and there's someone on wires going, and you're like, yeah, it's the monster shot, and, you know, and it's like that for 8 months, and then you finally do one, and then someone goes, oh, it doesn't work, it's too slow, you know, like, and you could have had that. And I find that, like, we were on Gods of Egypt as well, that Proyas one in Sydney, and they had a lot of real-time camera composites with a background, you know, so you get like the live edit thing with a sort of rough, I mean, it doesn't have to be photoreal, but
no,
you get a real sense of some space and even camera choices, you know. So I think there's a definite level for it. How much you want to try and get finals in camera, I guess, is up for debate, but the text, the tech's getting better.
Better and better. Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. Look, I might at this stage just throw it over to Ant, and you can take over with some of the chat questions I saw reaming in during it.
Yeah, there's been quite a few come through. Sorry, I thought you were calling me on a bit before, so I just had my video on awkwardly for a while.
All right. That's fine. Sorry.
But yeah, thanks so much for that, DJ. That was really good. I've been a Mortal Kombat fan since the 90s, so that was really good. But I'll start from sort of the start, from the questions that were pouring in when your prezzo was on. The first one is, in that freeze scene, there was like a 3D model of a human shooting. Do you know like what that was like used for in particular?
Yeah, with the jacks, right? So
yeah,
a lot of the time, like, we have to do a lot of match move to find out the position, right? So with that one, he wasn't even holding a gun. So that in particular, that was a full CG gun we added, and then we had to add all the frost effects over the top. So like most of the time now, it's with rigging is pretty, like, for a lot of the common stuff like rigging and match move, we've got, like, you know, a kind of 1 day turnaround on some of those kind of rigs just for posing. So a lot of the time, even for simple shots, we'll just make sure we know exactly where that character is. So, and then because we're doing ice and stuff, it's kind of like, we texture them so that if you have a finger showing through the ice, you get a real looking finger in the rendered ice, you know. So it's really there to understand and shadow and just kind of integrate it. So
yeah, okay. There was another question. It was like a 3-part question, and they're all sort of slightly different. But the first one was like, what software were you using for that? And do you have any advice for someone who's starting as a beginner? And then a dovetail from that is, any help in like the hiring process for someone who's sort of just getting out of uni? So
software wise, like, I guess we have a Houdini for a lot of the effects. So we've been a Houdini house for over a decade, and, you know, very advanced procedural effects solution. It's quite complex to break into. I think it's got a bit easier, but the control. So I think anyone that looks at fire or ice things and goes, wow, that's my life, that's their program, right? For sure. So yeah, I think just, you know, rip off the band-aid, do some tutorials, and that's your world for sure. A lot of the other stuff, like, we use Maya, still is industry standard. So we use Maya for a lot of our rigging, animation, technical kind of animation stuff. And then we used to render in Houdini, which was that solution, but now we're using Katana and Arnold as the render kind of scene lighting solution. So yeah, so still Maya, like basically anything creaturey based or rigging or technical animation, viz dev, any of this kind of stuff, we still pretty heavy reliant on Maya. And then a lot of the magic, crazy stuff happens in Houdini, which, you know, there's other solutions, but we have a good knowledge base in that.
yeah, okay.
That application.
So yeah, so any suggestions for someone who's sort of trying to enter the space as a beginner, and like sort of anything they can do to help the hiring process or help themselves land a job in visual effects?
I mean, there's a lot of, I guess, gumption and just, you know, I think it takes a certain fire to to sustain and get noticed, I guess, in a group of people. You know, like we run a course with our local uni, Adelaide Uni, and you know, out of that, it's pretty high sort of bar, and then out of that, there's 4 or 5 that just seem inevitable that, you know, we'll offer them a job in the next round. So there's some kind of keenness. I think having something to, because I think it's being clear about where you are, I guess, and because I think there's a lot of things you can take, because everything's free now, right? You can get Unreal, you can get Houdini freelance for free, you know, so I think the tool sets are kind of there, and I guess it's trying to work out where you are, because some people are amazing at big stories and editing and things like that. So you know, I think sometimes if you say to yourself, oh, I need to get all these bits together and it's going to be 10 years modeling, you know, if you think about doing a little short thing, you're like, okay, yeah, I'll do a model, like that can be 6 months. So I know that, you know, there's things like Blender and stuff that have these kits for short films that you can even grab and stuff. So I think for me, I would say it's having some expression, be it highly technical, like I'm trying to make a fire and here's a fire I'm matching and here's my match, you know, and then I guess more if you have a style, like I guess just trying to sort of show it, like it's really tough, I guess, until you've produced something, because you know, but I'd say keep knocking. I would say that there's pathways and events, like companies are reaching out, because companies like, you know, socially and all that. So I'd say that there's more opportunity to go to events like this, and you know, maybe post COVID there'll be a few more physical ones, and you can kind of lurk and give out cards and stuff. And then I think, you know, having content, be it in whatever medium, right? Like if you're an editor, like just put some edits up and then put links to them. And to be honest, I think the people that are already doing that already have a great start, because you're not waiting to be given the opportunity, you're kind of doing something, and it's really up to us to recognize that and you know, and grab that person who's up and coming and fired up. So yeah, I think a lot of it is just having a go and getting stuck in, basically, or being ready. So when you have a chat like this or some event, someone says, hey, you should send me your thing, you have a thing, you know, that you've cooked up. So I think don't wait.
We've got like that, like we have students put awards in for like the AEAF and stuff like that, but is there any particular events that jump out at the top of your head that's sort of more visual effects 3D focused?
Not from a body kind of thing. I professionally 9 to 5 it. I don't do, like, hobby wise, I don't follow a lot of industry outside of my narrow professional one, really. So not particularly. I know, like, for me, I guess there's things on Reddit, right? There's like storytelling things on Reddit, like in terms of obscure ones where people are giving a little theme, and you make like a 10-second loop, or you know, it's just a dude walking and you do your version of it. And I find that just getting into exposure like that is really good, I think.
Like we usually tell students when certain events and stuff are on, and even something like this is good, like when we have on campus versions of this sort of stuff as well. There's always sort of something going on. There was another question that I actually was really interested in as well. Did you have any close cooperation with the guys who work on, or the people who work on the actual game? So any of like the game visual effects artists, or was it pretty separate from the guys who work on that side of thing?
Pretty separate. There was like legally they obviously need to be sworn in, and I know that there was, I think Simon, the director, I heard stories of meetings with those people. They weren't too worried. I guess they weren't blocking anything or worried about what they would do. I think Simon was kind of keeping them in the loop, but I think it's more that Warner Brothers or New Line have the license, and they were just politely kept informed, you know. So nothing like Simon, we would, especially, I think, was it 11 or 10 just came out, Mortal Kombat 10?
Yeah.
Like just before that as well. So we were looking at a lot of those cutscenes and imagining that, you know, we would sort of piggyback on the latest versions anyway. So I think we were we did the game justice and built upon that world a bit anyway. But yeah, it's completely different. So, but we never had any direct contact apart from some reference.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
And then there was a few other questions that we've sort of touched on already about like just entering into the workforce, which is more just sort of getting your stuff out there, whatever way it is. But there was one other sort of slightly different question. Is there any places that you suggest to look for like mentors? Like outside of the university you're studying on, is there any particular studios who would offer sort of good mentorships or anything that you've heard of in the past?
No, not that sense. Like because we have an education division, right, which handles, we run a couple of courses. I don't know what the rates are like in terms of, you know, I guess paying to start. So that's been my exposure to it, which is linked to the uni. So yeah, but not really. Again, I guess I don't think like that anymore. Hey, in terms of the starting out, like for me, it was definitely about I guess just going to a few of those events, like the back in London, like the Leaf events. We used to be those kind of big vendor meetups and stuff, and you know, you'd be collecting all the goodie bags, but you'd also get a few numbers, and then for me, just kind of, I guess, following up. Like for me, my first job was one of them is Henson in London, and I did all the formal things. I put my CV in, and then I never heard anything, and I was kind of like, and then I rung up, you know, tried again, rung up, and they said, oh, we just lost your thing. We really wanted to speak to you. I'm glad you rang us back. You know, so for me, that slightly persistent thing is pretty good. I don't know, because being on someone's file is a pretty good thing. So even saying, you know, I'd like to get into this, and here's some work I've done or whatever, you know, drawing concept. Because sometimes we do, like with Mortal Kombat, we actually built half the concept team was from a graduate year that had just happened. It's just, you know, because of the volume needed. And one of our guys was a teacher at one of those courses, like another one. That he just picked, you know, 4 or 5 of what he thought was the right guys. So yeah, it's pretty.
I noticed there was a fair bit of concept art in your presentation. Is that a fairly big part of it, that you're going to concept everything that comes through, or do you fly by, you know, like the seat of your pants for some other stuff?
Most half. Yeah, certainly. Like there's big fantastical things that you want to get a handle on, or you know, some things will take a few weeks to set up, and that's, you've only got 10 days or something to do it.
Yeah.
So some of the effectsy things we tend to paint, but after a while you can paint things that don't, you know, won't work, or actually get really
unpractical.
Unpractical. So there's a point where you stop as well.
Yeah.
That was it on my side, Adam.
That's good. I just a few other questions just about yourself. I mean, that we could touch on, like, what do you wish you'd known from the start when you're starting out that you know now? What do you find challenging about your role? Is it the overtime? Is there too much overtime? And what do you enjoy most after all of this time? I imagine you're still passionate about it. You're still into it. So yeah, perhaps you could give us a bit of your personal insights.
Yeah. What do I guess, what do I enjoy most? Like, I guess I'm at the point of Teams and client interface, right? So I guess for me, I've always had this thing about wanting to service and please someone else, you know, like doesn't matter. I'm never happy. I'm a perfectionist, so I'm never happy. It's always taken, or someone else says stop, and you know, so for me, I love that march towards that goal, trying to get as much of the rubbish out the way. Like, I mean, you know, realistically speaking, a good 70% is just to get you that thing where it starts to work, you know. And some shows you finish and you barely, you know, you're like, oh God, we've got to, you know, we've got it working. You know, realistically, some shows are like that. Some shows you get to 90% and they're not happy, and they'll grind you, like Gravity and a few of these kind of projects where the attention to detail is so specific and everything's like scientific, and you have to justify every decision. Oh, I wouldn't do that in space, you know. So I really like those ones, because you get to that 90% and then there's still time and there's still money, and you just get pushed. And at some point, like, no one knows, like Dumbo, like, who knows what bubbles do when they, you know, but you just kind of,
when they're blown by a baby elephant.
Exactly. So I love getting to that point. Like, and for me, Mortal Kombat, because it was definitely an underdog in terms of budget. Like, it was shot well, planned well, and I think the director was pretty driven about his vision. But for me, it's just when you feel like you did what you said, is that, you know, when the client's happy and your team are like, yeah, cool, it didn't change, you know, there wasn't a table flip halfway. And so sometimes those kind of things where it all works out and you get to that last 10%, which is really rare, you know, like 1 in 5, you get into that zone where it's all, everyone's singing and there's nothing weird. So I like that, you know. Challenging, like, I guess it's been tough remote. I'm a real tactile person, so this last couple of years the remote thing has been a personal challenge. Just
for everybody, I think.
You know, just I'm such a body language person, so I found that hard. But, you know, that kicked in halfway through Mortal Kombat. It was one of the few shows that was already shooting and actually carried into COVID. Everything else stopped, you know, so it was good for that as well. And then for me, it's the team stuff, like because now I generally run teams. I don't actually get hands-on. I don't, you know, I do a few bash comps, explain a few ideas, but it's always about, I guess, motivating and I guess explaining. I like the turning something where someone says, what? Into like, nah, this thing, like, look at this thing on this, you know, whatever pictures I found on Reddit or whatever.
Like a Japanese gardening tool, don't you get it?
Obviously, yeah. So for me, I guess the research side of it, because every job is something different, you know, deep space, we got to freeze a guy's arms. What does that look like? You know? So I think that keeps it fresh, is just every time, because you got your company, you've got your renderers, and you've got, oh god, ice takes forever to render. Then you've got the, oh cool, I like the way it did that, you know, and you just always got to come back to those moments where
That's
so,
awesome. Thank you. Well, it's been awesome. We've taken a lot of your time. How do you feel there? And you got anything else you want to ask him or anybody else, or are we good?
No, we're all good. Yeah, that was everything. That was really awesome. Thanks heaps, DJ.
Yeah, that's great. Fantastic. Awesome.
Yeah, I'd say plenty of work out there. Keep trying and just best foot forward, and, you know, 3 no's, the next one might be a yes. Hey, so
yeah,
definitely keep going.
That's great encouragement. Thank you. Awesome. All right. Well, I guess we'll be prepared to move on now. Thank you again, and thanks George as well. George still here? Is he here somewhere? No, he's gone. George is gone. So thanks George as well. And I guess we'll let DJ go. Dennis, thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
And we'll keep an eye out for what Rising the Sun has got in store coming up next. I'm sure there's some great projects in the works. Thanks, mate. All right, so that was fantastic, wasn't it? Everybody, it was awesome to see all of that breakdown, and he was so generous with his time, and hopefully you got your questions answered. And if you've got more questions about the course at AIT, you can hang around and ask those questions. We're going to give you a little bit of an insight into AIT. We're going to get Charlotte on screen now, who's going to take us through some of the details of the course at AIT. Hi, Charlotte. Welcome.
Hello,
Did you enjoy that? Wasn't that great?
Yeah, it was awesome. I've never
amazing.
actually seen Mortal Kombat, so this is new for me. I want to see the film now.
I know. That's the thing, is that it just inspires you because you see the work that goes into it. And like I said, they did such a great job with that movie that taking it from a game is not always easy. It's challenging to translate from a game into a film, but you know, it was incredibly enjoyable. But just the sheer work in those visual effects, animation.
Yeah, it makes me appreciate it more.
Yeah, exactly. I'm a big sucker for animation. I love the creature stuff. So I love that
Yeah.
reptilian dragon and the big fire dragon and all of the creatures.
The lizard was cool too. I like the lizard.
The lizard, yeah, the lizard creature.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Well, we're going to go through now for the people that are here and want to know a little bit about AIT and how we can help you, equip you with the skills to get into a studio like Rising Sun Pictures and work on great projects like that in visual effects. So I'll throw it over to you, Charlotte, and you can take it from here.
Okay. Great. Excellent. Thanks so much. So can you see my screen there, Adam?
Yes, I can see.
Okay.
Fine.
Beautiful. All right. Okay, so everyone, I'm going to give you a little bit of a rundown. I'm Charlotte, as Adam said, from Sydney in AIT, and I'm just here to give you a bit of a rundown about our 3D design course here at AIT. And Adam, thank you so much for your introduction. Anthony's on the chat, everyone. So make sure you also select everyone, not hosts and panelists, when you ask a question, and he will take questions at the end. Okay. So as you know, we've got 2 campuses, Sydney and Melbourne, and AIT has been producing progressive education over a range of different courses. So we've got film and video, we've got games programming, 2D animation, 3D design, games design, and mobile app development. But I'm here to show you a little bit more about 3D design. So in 3D design, what we do, we help you create 3D art and graphics that is engaging and is suitable for the film, games, and design industries. Okay, so making compelling characters or creatures from your own imagination and body movements, the intricacies that you saw in Mortal Kombat, that's what we help you to produce. So for example, in film, you see the special effects. In games, you're creating the environments and the characters. And then in the design element, you're looking at marketing material. So we'll help you produce all that. And there's so many different jobs that you can get from doing a degree with us. So there's 3D artist, modeler, sculptor, lighter, rigger, to name a few. Even a 3D environmentalist, where you're creating the environment and the characters. In terms of the industry itself, like the education that we have is theory-based, but it's also very hands-on. So we've got the skills that you gain, the different software that you learn as well. So we've got a couple of software that we learn. So there's Autodesk, we've got ZBrush, Substance Painter, Unity, and Unreal Engine. So Unreal and Unity you would know from the games that you play, and others help to create the texture in characters. And maybe, Adam, you can go into a little bit more detail when you in the next section in a bit. So we've got lots of industry programs as well that can help to get you connected to the industry. So the first one's the Forge, and that's a 3-unit, a 3-subject course that you basically do a project in a team. So it could be a game, it could be a film, it could be some graphic art, and that you actually present to a panel of judges, and they critique it, they give you encouragement, and that can really get you really well connected to the industry, and actually you can get a job out of it as well. And so what you learn, you also learn soft skills, so collaboration, team building, working to a deadline, time management skills as well. And so working efficiently through a vigorous schedule, it stimulates what you would learn in the industry actually. So you go from like getting a brief, you're planning, you're executing it, and you're reflecting it. So you go through that production process. It's not only important to have the knowledge and those skills, it's really important to know how to market yourself and the presentation skills. So in our Launchpad subject, you're going to learn things like interview skills, presentation skills, how to write a cover letter, resume, and like personal branding as well. The internship is a great opportunity. It's actually an elective, but a lot of our students choose it because this is where we place you in a company for 120 hours, and you get to work with people like Rising Sun Pictures, where you get to network with people, learn new software as well. So great opportunity there. Okay, so next, a little bit more about our courses. So we have 3 intakes in the year. The next one's May 30th, and we have 3 trimesters, so May, September, February. We have 3 courses. We have the diploma, which is done in 1 year, associate degree, and our Bachelor of Interactive Media, which we specialise in 3D design. So with the Bachelor, you can do that over the standard 3-year option, which is 2 to 3 subjects per trimester, or you can do the accelerated, which is 4 subjects per trimester. Each subject is 3 hours of face-to-face teaching, or you could do that also online. We mentioned that before, that all our classes are live streamed in a hybrid version. So you could be at home, studying at home, or you can be face-to-face. So every class, as I said, is 3 hours, and you have an extra hour of self-study time at home. So the prices are here, so for the domestic and international, and for our Australian citizens, we offer fee help. And I'm going to now pass it on to Adam, who's going to go a little bit deeper into the subjects that we take. So Adam, can you describe a little bit more about what you study in the course? Oh, you're just on mute.
Sorry, can you hear me now? Yes. Sure. So I'll go over some of these subjects that are related to visual effects. I had a question I saw in the chat. Which course? Which course do you choose to do visual effects? Well, we have a Bachelor of Interactive Media is what we call our course, and it covers a wide range of subjects that are fairly integrated. And we heard Dennis talking there a little bit even about how games and film, the gap between them is shortening in terms of the same tools really, and the same processes and the same methodologies are used, the same skill sets that we teach you can be applied to gaming or to film, or if you just want to go straight into animation. So there's a lot of crossover in this Bachelor of Interactive Media course, and the subjects that we are offering you to do now can be applied across those different disciplines. So what you're learning will equip you with the skills to go in whatever direction you might want to go in. So in the first year, we start off with some fairly common fundamental subjects that teach you elements of design. We had George earlier from George Little talking about design, the importance of design. So design is very important in our course. Creative drawing is a subject that we do in first year, where obviously we teach you to draw. We get some students coming in going, I can't draw. Why am I doing this subject? But drawing is fundamental to all of these subjects that you learn. And the processes that we teach you at AIT take you through the fundamentals and the basics. And then you get into more complex applications using software. So in the first year, we do digital storytelling. We're telling you how to tell a story visually, how to use digital tools to create that story, the importance of story structure, character development, character arcs, story arcs, and we use storyboarding, animatics to help create that visual language and get you used to things like filmmaking language. Screen language is related to that, for example, where you start to learn some of the terms and the theories and the principles, the fundamentals of screen, what it means to do an edit, to do a cut, what it means in terms of camera framing, staging, how to visually tell a story on a 2-dimensional screen, composition. Creative drawing is related to that. And creative drawing, you don't have to be an artist, you don't have to be a fantastic drawer, but we do tell you how to practice drawing, teach you how to practice drawing, I should say, and develop those skills and get better and apply those skills. Digital images is more about composition. So you're taking shots with still cameras and putting them into Photoshop and digital software to manipulate them, and again, create interesting, compelling, appealing composition. Shooting and editing gets down to, again, visual language, where you can start to take your framing and your photography and your lighting and your composition more seriously. We give you an introduction to game design. So you start to learn the principles of how to create something that's interactive. So how you get enjoyment out of challenging a player and then giving them the payoff, giving them the goal, setting them a goal and giving them tools or the agency to actually achieve that goal in a game design sense. Animation, so we give you traditional animation skills in the first year. This is where we teach you with drawing, traditional 2D animation, claymation, stop motion animation, beats or musical animation, even pixelation, which is using your body in a very interactive way to animate with. So it's a real lot of fun, that class. And we give you an introduction to 3D. So we're starting to give you, introduce you to Maya, to the principles of 3D volumes, how to use the tools and techniques, navigating Maya. We heard Dennis telling us that Maya industry is still industry standard for animation, for modeling. So that's a great core subject that I'm, very closely associated with developing, which, students tend to enjoy. It's challenging to jump into 3D if you haven't done it before, but it's worthwhile in the long run, of course. After that first year, you can exit with a diploma and you've got a broad general understanding across a lot of different subjects, games, film and animation related. And again, they're all integrated and they all cross over in that first year. From there, you get into term 3, where we have our digital pathways, which teaches you about industry, about the trends in the digital industries, what's social media is doing, how design is being applied digitally. Interesting contextualizing subject to give you some sort of basis for where you might want to head with your studies. Audio. Of course, we didn't talk a lot to Dennis about sound, but sound is a huge part of anything that you do in the creative industries, whether it's film, animation, or games. You have to be thinking of how the sound is being used, what are the key sounds, the background sounds, music, and how you will mix them together. So we've developed a really strong digital audio design subject to introduce you to that process. 3D animation and 3D modeling, both subjects that I'm, again, sort of coordinating, which are fantastic. So we really start to dive deep into 3D, getting you involved in the principles of animation, body mechanics, the physics of how characters and creatures might move. And then you apply that in a number of practical exercises, and you learn the fundamentals of animation developed by Disney animators, traditional animators, and apply them in the 3D environment. Again, using Maya, the industry standard software, and giving you confidence to go out to a studio and say, hey, I want to be a 3D animator. Whether it's for a game studio or for a film studio like Rising Sun, or for just an animation studio, you can start to develop professional processes and techniques as a 3D animator and hone your skills. You won't be up to professional level by the end of that subject, but you'll certainly be on your way. 3D modeling is where we introduce ZBrush. Charlotte mentioned that as one of the pieces of software that we teach. Again, it's an industry standard software which teaches you more about digital sculpting. You can think of ZBrush more as like having a virtual lump of clay, and you can mold it. It's very high density. You can sculpt it. It's very intuitive the way you use it. You can paint it and create incredibly high detail, the sort of detail that's used on that digital double that Dennis was talking about in his talk there, that they created with one of the characters, where you need a high degree of detail. We use ZBrush, which again is the industry standard, and that's also related with Maya. It goes back and forward between Autodesk and Maya as well. So we're following industry practice, we're following industry tools and techniques, and giving you the skills, hopefully, that'll equip you for a career in this industry. In year 2, entertainment and media design principles and advanced 3D animation, you can start to specialize. So here you can get more into the design aspect. You can learn more about entertainment and media in terms of a cultural sense, and how different genres are being used, cultural appropriation or misappropriation. if you like. All of those interesting things that are happening in society in terms of what you're doing as an interactive designer. Design principles are core. They go across everything. So from film design to character design, color design, sound design, a lot of the principles you learn in that design principles subject will be applied across everything else you're doing. So all of these are very much integrated. You can start to do electives at this stage and start to specialize. So you might want to go into games and apply your 3D skills into games. You might want to go into film and apply them in CGI in film. And we start to cross over here and we start to get skills being shared among students from different disciplines. Advanced 3D animation is where you really take that 3D animation subject further and start to make your own story. So in advanced 3D animation, you use a lot of those storytelling skills that you've learned in the earlier subjects and apply them to your own story, your own little short animation, your own character arc. You can even voice the character. We get students actually doing their own voices for some of the characters in some sense, and they have a lot of fun starting to make their own projects. All of this stuff that you're learning has practical outcomes, which can go to your show reel, to your folio, and you can start to put it on your website, social media. You can start to use it to start to get a presence in the industry. In the later years, decoding media is again about some of the topical aspects of media in culture, more electives that you can choose from. And then we go in the third year, as Charlotte was mentioning, the Launchpad, which really starts to hone your skills and equip you for industry, get you ready for equips you with branding. So getting consistent sort of identity, resumes, job applications, all of those practical things which help you. Then we do the Forge, and the Forge is great. The Forge is fantastic. I'm heavily involved in that now even, and we have a lot of fun in the Forge. Very challenging 3-trimester subject, triple subject. But basically in the Forge, you group together with each other. You pick your favorite students, your friends, your colleagues, and you form little groups, and you make either a short 3D animation or a short film or a game or a design concept, or you can actually cross over a little bit. And sometimes we have short films that have 3D elements in them, or even 2D animation elements within the film, or we get a 3D student that will work on a game and put their elements into a game. So there's a bit of a crossover there, but that's really, really fun, because at this level, we want you to be able to create some content that is as close to industry standard as possible. So you can come out of the degree, you can put it on your show reel or your folio, and you can be confident that it's a really good result, high level, and hopefully will get you noticed. We enter as many of them as we can into film animation festivals, film festivals. We showcase them in gaming events, if it's a game. So all of this stuff, we're now trying to really, in this third year, prepare you for industry. And that's basically our whole focus all along. From there, you can exit with your bachelor. And hopefully that gives you a more detailed, we have one thing I'll just mention. He did mention, Dennis, Houdini. At the moment, we don't teach Houdini, but we've got active plans to bring in Houdini and start to teach that. We've got talks underway because it's so important in visual effects. We feel it's something that we should be using. And of course, Unreal and Unity, the game engines that we use, we focus more on Unreal now. We are starting to integrate that into virtual production for films. So we're trying to keep up with current trends and integrate those trends into our course. So hopefully that gives you a bit more of a detailed analysis of our subjects.
Yeah. Great, thanks so much, Adam. So we can see it goes from a really basic overview and then going into more industry related programs, as we can see. So just to conclude, just to remind you guys, we've got 3 intakes. The next one's May 30th, so, and then September and next year Feb. So we've got the 3 intakes there. and then it's easy to apply. So you can apply easily over on our website. International students, we ask you to please email us to this email here. The requirements are pretty straightforward. So all you need is your HSC certificate. You don't need an ATAR, or it can be a Cert 4 diploma or a first year of your bachelor degree. Okie dokie. So if you have any questions, if you need a course guide or subject list or any questions, we've got our team here. So Donna from Melbourne, Anthony from Sydney, and me, Charlotte, from the Sydney office, and Tice represents our international students. So what I'll do, I'll invite Anthony on for any questions that were in the chat to ask myself or Adam. So I'll just stop sharing my screen. So how was the chat, Anthony?
Yeah, it was good. It was good. Just having a nice little convo. Like I guess the main question that was asked, a couple of people asked the sort of same sort of question about electives. So like if you're doing, if you're specializing in 2D with us, but you want to do a bit of 3D, what's your suggestion on how to do that, Adam? And sort of what subjects can and can't you do?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and we get that question a lot. So 2D and 3D. So we do encourage that. We try and get people to spread across both disciplines, particularly for animation. Animation doesn't really matter whether you're a 2D animator or a 3D animator. The principles of animation actually are the same. But we've got to be careful that there are prerequisites, or at least implied skill sets, for getting into 3D. So it's very difficult, for example, to go from if you've been doing 2D all along, to jump into 3D animation if you haven't done 3D introduction. So if you haven't learned how to use Maya and the navigation skills and how to get around Maya, it's more difficult. It's not impossible, but it's more difficult to make that transition into 3D because you're learning from scratch. And because a lot of these software packages and solutions are scaffolded in terms of, you need to learn the basics before you can learn the more complex stuff. It's sort of a bit prohibitive in terms of almost like a prerequisite. However, I have had students in the past that when they get to the Forge level, they have learned 2D animation and they're good animators, and we can quickly train them up to know what they need to know in a project-based setting, like Forge, to actually jump into Maya and start to do some 3D animation. So, there are ways to cross over that way. And also for games. So if you want to go into games, it's much easier to make that transition because games and 3D are very closely related. The tool sets are getting very close now. So we have a lot of animators that do end up doing game characters in the Forge. And we have game students that want to learn 3D modeling or want to learn a little bit more about sculpting in ZBrush and that sort of thing. So that sort of transition is easier from an elective point of view. It all depends where you're coming from and what else you want to go across. But we have to be realistic about mixing and matching those skill sets.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Just on the sort of topic of 3D based subjects, is it just the 3D modeling one that uses ZBrush, or is there a couple?
ZBrush, we do have an advanced 3D modeling, and I think that is one of the electives that you can choose, which is why it wasn't listed. But we do have advanced 3D modeling where we get more into creature modeling and creating monsters and four-legged creatures or winged creatures. Even though in my current 3D modeling class, a lot of students are already doing creatures. So everyone loves creatures. So they love to do monsters anyway in the basic class. But we also, ZBrush is used in games. So in a lot of the game asset subjects, you're also doing 3D modeling and you're doing ZBrush is there to texture your model, surface your model to go into a game engine. Part of the process for 3D modeling, sculpting, is to take the high density version of the asset, whether it's a creature or a hard surface asset, and then optimize that down to a lower poly version in, say, Maya that has the same level of detail applied as a surfacing element, a texture map, a normal map, a displacement map, and then that's what goes into a game. So that process we very much teach that optimized process, because you can't just sculpt in ZBrush and leave it there. You have to take your work in ZBrush, since it's very high density, and be able to optimize it, take it where it needs to go, whether that's animation or even a film asset or into a game. It needs to be optimized.
Okay.
And of course, the Forge, they can use any one of these software packages, whatever you need in the Forge to create whatever your team is requiring for that project in the Forge. So
yeah. Awesome. Ray, I just said she's heaps excited for that subject, so that's good.
Ray, Ray is great. She's very, very positive, and she jumped into one of my classes that she's not enrolled in the other day. She's chomping at the bit. She wanted to have a sneak preview, so she said, "Hey, can I jump in?" And we said, "Yeah, sure." It was great to have her in there. She had a really positive attitude to learning and is really enthusiastic. And that's the attitude that we want to see in our students. We want to see you really, chomping at the bit, really keen to learn this stuff. Yeah.
Well, that's pretty much it. So that's all I've got.
I have a quick question, actually. I wanted to ask you, Adam. Do you learn any programs in the diploma? So in the first year, do you already start learning about, like, with some software?
Yeah, I think you learn Maya, so you learn 3D intro. So you're going to be learning Maya. So from a 3D point of view, you get an introduction to Maya. It's pretty intensive because we take you through modeling, texturing, unwrapping, rigging, even a little bit of rigging, and then lighting and rendering. No animation in 3D. And then, of course, in that first year, we introduce you to all the Adobe products, the Adobe Suite. So I didn't touch on them, but Photoshop obviously is king in terms of being industry standard still. After Effects, Illustrator, for the drawers and the designers out there. For the shooting and editing, we get your photographs and you can bring them into Adobe and start to manipulate them and create different compositions. So very big on the Adobe Suite, which the Adobe Suite we carry through for the entire course. So you're pretty much going to be using that everywhere. Just on licensing, I'll just finish and say, as an educational institution, students get access to free educational software where it's provided. So Adobe isn't one of those. We give you those licenses, so you can come into the campus, obviously, and use those licenses. Maya Autodesk is free educational software. ZBrush, they've done a great thing in the lockdown and provided students with the ZBrush licenses to use at home, so they can use them at home or bring them in. So we equip you with the whatever it takes. Obviously Unity and Unreal as well. We equip you with the tools that you need as students, as well as of course the computers and the equipment to learn these skills and apply them.
If you're studying from home, you have access to all the software.
You have access to what you need if you're studying from home. So Toon Boom is another example for the 2D animators. We provide, Harmony provides Toon Boom educational licenses. So we can equip that because we're an education provider. Same with Autodesk, Maya, they can use that at home. ZBrush, traditionally we didn't do that, but in the lockdown we have given students their own licenses. So very generously AIT actually purchases temporary licenses for the term for students to use at home. So students, we acknowledge that obviously studying remotely has presented a lot of challenges, and we're equipping students with the tools they need to study, obviously. So if they've got to work from home, we provide them with the software and stuff like that. So it's great. Good question.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Cool. Okay. So I guess that's it, is it? Have we got anything else that people want to talk about? Any more questions, or
don't think
we
so.
can bid everybody farewell. So thank you all for attending. Fantastic to see the enthusiasm in the questions and the chat. Thanks again to George Little and Dennis coming in from RSP for that fantastic presentation. And thanks to our course advisors for their insightful descriptions of the course. And hopefully we'll see anybody that's interested on campus at AIT very, very soon. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.